Hello. Welcome to the outdoors on this weekend because it's gorgeous now. Just look. Isn't that nice? It's lovely here in Massachusetts. So I thought I'd bring this outside. It's the right day for it. We're talking about transgender issues in the prison system this week. This is not an issue that I have a lot of experience with. I've had some altercations with the law. I've never been arrested, knock wood. So I had to do a bit of research and a bit of creative thinking. So bear with me. I suppose I should start with my personal experience. Almost all my trouble with the police has been in the context of activism, which is expected and fine. The only time when my gender has been an issue was this past November when I was involved in the student protests in London against the cuts to higher education. You might have seen it on the news, there was massive protests in the UK. Biggest ones were in London. And there was massive turnout. Some of it got quite nasty. I wasn't there for the Millbank thing, for those of you who followed that, but I did get involved. I was stuck in this small kettle, which is when the police surround a group of people and keep them there for a couple hours, waiting for them to die down or waiting for orders to disperse them or whatever. It's weird. We didn't really get any information about it, so because we were just kept there for several hours. So this was in Westminster. It was quite a cold night, and we had been there since about 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and it was getting on to about 8 or 9 at night when they started letting certain people out of the kettle. They'd been keeping them there, the police had, and they started going through the crowd looking for young girls to leave because they were trying to disperse a little bit, and there were a lot of people, who hadn't had anything to eat or drink or hadn't gone to the bathroom, and so they were trying to let some people go, and there were a lot of school children there because obviously the cuts to higher education affected them in the next few years. So they were going through and finding girls about 15 to 17, 18. And there were a lot of parents outside, so they were asking about that. There was a lot of pressure from the parents. So they were finding young girls and bringing them out. And there was a lot of to do in the kettle about that because one of my friends who got asked to leave didn't because she thought it was flagrant sexism. And a policeman asked me how old I was, but I don't know if he was sure if I was male or female. So he asked me how old I was, and I told him. And he just kept walking. So I was like, oh, thanks. I would have stayed anyway. There was a big feeling of solidarity in the group. But, it just made it very apparent. My computer's gone off. Just made it very apparent that the police officers, law enforcement are very gendered and very attentive to gender, and I suppose they have to be. I guess their rationale for the thing in the kettle was that, first of all, it was the young girls, so it was an age thing. They didn't want to have legal issues with minors being there, and also, I guess, a physical thing or just an ingrained sexist thing that, girls were less capable of dealing with irritated police officers than males. And for people in between, they were just kind of passing them by, obviously. I think they have to be attentive to gender as law enforcement. But I think there's a lot of stereotypes and stuff that come along with that, especially in kind of a more militaristic organization like a law enforcement squad. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of unnecessary attention to gender in law enforcement and by extension in the prison system. The guy driving by just gave me a look. This is Massachusetts. We don't sit out on our porches and yeah. So, in terms of prison itself, I think we do need to have prisons that are attentive to transgender needs, either like specifically prisons for transgender people or facilities where they can go and be safe, because it's not just, I mean, obviously we know that being trans or having a particular sexual identity isn't a choice, and so it's a part of who we are, and so to ask us to be put in a situation where we are not among people who understand and respect that is not only demeaning, but also dangerous. As Stefan pointed out, I think I agree with what he was saying about if I got sent to prison, I'd just butch up and join a gang in the women's side, because it's a safety thing, you know, and it's not. I don't think it's just a luxury to ask for a place where, you know, certain people can be safe, because I do think prisoners' rights have been neglected in many countries over history and up to the present, and that especially with growing awareness to transgender rights and the existence of trans people, that needs to be something that's talked about at least, because it's just not on the radar to most politicians, even people who are interested in prison rights. On kind of a different note, I was watching a few months ago, I saw a documentary called Shakespeare Behind Bars. This was interesting to me because I'm an actor and I work at a theater, and I do a lot of Shakespeare. And this documentary, there was some bits that really struck me, where this was about, there's like 20 male inmates in this high security prison who elected to join. I think they got out of like certain work duties or something if they did this program where they were in a full-length Shakespeare production, and they put this on in the prison, and it was an ongoing program. And so some of the bits that struck me the most were there were a few people who talked about gender and sexuality, but there was one guy in particular who was playing Miranda, because obviously there were males playing female roles, which would have been the case in Shakespeare's time as well. But this guy who was playing Miranda in this production of The Tempest said that playing the female role brought out a female side of him that he always knew existed, but he had never been allowed to explore in the outside. And because he was in the context of this program in prison, it was both allowed and encouraged and acceptable even to people who weren't in the program, that, you know, he was exploring this feminine side, even if it was just on stage. And this guy wasn't really educated or articulate. He described what he was feeling as being bisexual and being attracted to both men and women. But I think what he was really talking about, from what he was describing, was this feeling of having a really feminine side to him, that he had never been allowed to explore or think about or express. And over the course of the production, he kind of femmed up a bit, and was really invested in this idea of being able to play a woman. So I just thought that kind of program, I was really struck by that. And I thought that kind of program was really cool, that kind of education program, which allows people to, even in the context of prison, even in a really controlled life, with certain social and psychological and physical expectations, to have that kind of program that allows, and I think theater is a great way to explore yourself, personally. But I was really impressed with that notion that through an education program in a prison, you could be thinking about your gender and sexuality in a way that you might not be able to in the context of normal social expectations and cultural expectations. So I'll link you to that documentary. It's worth a watch, and I'll link you to stuff about the kettling if I can find it. I think there is some commentary on gender in regards to that protest. So I'll let you go and go outside and enjoy this lovely weather. Bye.